Welcome to the Weird Wolf Rules Corner. That is horrible to say. Look, we get a lot of guff, sometimes rightfully so, from commentators on the videos, just letting us know what rules we're getting wrong. So we thought we'd start a little series where we tried to clarify some of those rules and clear them up for everyone else, just in case you're also getting them wrong, because some of them are very confusing. Today, we are going to be starting off this series with the combat phase, and more accurately, the fight's first phase and the remaining combat phase. We're going to be talking about the active and the inactive player. Just quickly, the active player is the player whose turn it is. The inactive player is whose turn it isn't, and how that interacts with units that have the fight first keyword, units that gain the fight first keyword effectively by charging in, and then alternating for the remainder of combat as you normally would. So, as we've alluded to, the combat phase is technically split up into two different phases. We've got the fight's first phase that happens just after charging, and then we've got the normal fights phase that happens after all the other charging and fights first units have fought. The fights first happens at the start of the fight phase, as you would imagine, but what is really important to remember is that yes, you do get fights first by charging, but if the opponent also has fights first units, the inactive player gets priority on picking. So you may charge in, but if you're charging into a combat that has a fights first unit that the opponent controls, then you're actually going to get hit first before you get to hit, even though you've charged. We're going to go over a couple of scenarios to make that a bit simpler because it is terribly confusing, so bear with us, but it might be helpful to learn, and it's certainly helpful for us. So we're going to come back with the scenario in just 1 second. Here on the board, we have a unit of Terminators charging a unit of Death Guard. By charging, this unit is giving themselves fights first, and so will go first in the combat phase. Same move again, but this time the Death Guard have the Biologist Putrefier in the unit that grants them the fight's first ability. Just as in the remaining combat phase, the inactive player here has the priority. So even though the Terminators have charged in, and you would expect them for them to go first, they would end up going second because the Plague Marines would get to fight first in the fight's first bit of the combat phase. So here we have a slightly more complicated scenario, but bear with us, we have multiple units in combat and we're just going to get to the bottom of who does actually get to fights first here. Our lovely Terminator assistants are stuck in combat with a unit of Poxwalkers, a Dreadnought is charging into a Plague Burst Crawler, a unit of Berserkers with fights first thanks to the Master of Executions in the unit is charging into a unit of Death Guard Terminators, and lastly, Angron is charging into a unit of Plague Marines that do have the fights first keyword thanks to the Biologist Putrefier in the unit. So, who's going first? Well, in the fights first part of the combat, we're going to have Angron, the Berserkers, the Dreadnought, and the Plague Marines with fights first. For the remaining combat, we're going to have the Terminators, the Plague Burst Crawler, and the Death Guard Terminators. Now, as the inactive player, the Death Guard player here, after the charges actually does get to fight first. So, in the fights first phase, the Plague Marines fight first, even though they didn't charge into combat that turn. We'll then have Angron, the Berserkers, and the Dreadnought all part of the fights first phase because either they have an ability or they've charged in and gained combat in the fights first phase here. Moving into the remaining combat phase, we're going to have the Death Guard player choosing the first unit to attack, alternating as usual after that. This may seem like a proper nightmare, and it is, but once you know it, you do know it and it starts to make sense. If it did make sense, let us know in the comments, and also let us know anything else that you might want clarified in a similar video to this, and we'll see you in the next Rules Corner. Thank you very much.